You ready?
Almost.
Okay, let me know.
It's slow for whatever
That's
reason.
all right.
Yes, we're ready. You're live. You're live.
Okay, so this is the Finance Committee meeting of the Norwalk Board of Education. So we're going to call this meeting to order. It is now 6 o'clock. First order of business is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
I will abstain because I was not part of this committee when you all got together last. So I am going to, I won't be voting on this. So
I didn't see any changes or corrections.
I didn't either.
So the minutes are approved.
Yes, approved. Pretty.
So on to the next matter on the agenda is public comments. Do we have anybody who is scheduled to speak during public comments?
Not that I can see online.
Okay. So we'll keep it moving. We'll go on to the monthly financial report. So Mr. Osmani, you're up.
Thank you and good evening.
Good evening.
And
Good evening.
Sherry, congrats on becoming our chair. So we're excited to begin the year with you.
Thanks, guys. Get ready.
We're ready.
Now the fun starts.
We're ready. If you are anything like you were on the BET, then we are lucky
Thank
to
you.
have you lead this committee.
Thank you.
So again, the monthly financials, we have them in two sections. You'll notice that this month you don't have that narrative that I've typically prepared for you. So I'll kind of talk through this. We've
Mhm.
the team has kind of been preoccupied with budgets and budget setting, but we will still provide you the narrative at a later time. But I will walk through where we are. So this is as of December, 6 months into the year, about half of the year through, 50% of the budget. So if you look at this sheet that I'm on now, just to start from the bottom,
Mhm.
that the total spend for the year is about 45%, 50% into the year, which is consistent with the trend. We have quite a number of particularly contracts that we pay upfront, and therefore we front load those expenses. But then at the same time, we also in the salaries, on the salary side, we also have balloon payments for teachers during the summer months that we don't front load, but we encumber them. We account for those towards the end. But overall, just from the overall picture, the total budget spend right now is 45.2% halfway through the year, which is consistent. So there's nothing yet raising the alarm in terms of our overall spend. So then what I'd like to do is kind of briefly walk through the individual, beginning with the salaries, benefits, and down. Behind this summary page are a series of line item pages that break down further, like the salary lines. So you have those individual object lines that make up the total salary line. So beginning with salaries, we are at a total salary year to date about 54.3 million, about 40% of our salary spend halfway through the year, which again is a good spending trend, consistent with where we would be. We are at about 2.5% higher this year than we were this time last year, which again is consistent when you consider the fact that our average salary increases are 2.5%. So that 2.5% year over year growth is consistent with where we would anticipate us being this year. The one thing that we're also noticing this year is you'll recall that in prior years, we have had challenges filling positions, high rate of vacancies. We are more stable this year. And therefore, whereas years back, we were underspent in the salaries line because we just didn't have the personnel on board. And now we're closer to normal where we would be salary wise. So the 2.5% is consistent with where we would be with the budget. The second area here is benefits. Benefits is at 18.8, which is about 48% of total budget, consistent again with where we are in the year. Most of the benefits are transfers from the general fund because we pay our health insurance premiums into the health fund account. And therefore we transfer those funds from the general fund into the health insurance account. And therefore what this is reflecting is halfway through the year, we have made 50% of those transfers because we make those transfers quarterly. So again, that's consistent. We are monitoring the health insurance in the health insurance account. As we had anticipated at the beginning of the year when we approved the budget, you remember towards the end of the budget, we were informed of the high increase in the rates for the insurance. What we're also seeing on the health insurance side is that many of those medical services that people were foregoing due to COVID, some of those elective procedures, the knee replacements, the things that could wait, those are now being performed. And so we're gradually beginning to see those costs picking up on the health insurance side. So we don't believe it'll impact this year's budget as much, but we are monitoring it as we're talking about the FY24 budget to see how that could potentially impact that budget as we're building it. But we're going through that process and evaluating that. Our professional and technical services year to date, we are at about 3.2 million, which is about 40% of the budget. Again, we're at 50% through the year. That is trending where we would anticipate it to trend. The one item on here that is slightly higher is cost related to transportation. Typically, what we've done in the past, I think the trend last year was a number of those transportation invoices were paid later in the year. Working with the operations team, what we've tried to do this year is to kind of pay them as they come, and therefore we're seeing a more normalized trend of those expenses. So compared to last year, it may show that we're slightly higher, but by the end of the year, we will be where we anticipate it to be, because that is a fixed contract. So we don't anticipate going over that contract amount. So that's is professional services. Property services, this is essentially the upkeep of our properties, our custodial services, and those types of things. That again is consistent with where we would be. We are at 4.5 million, about 57% into the budget. Many of the property services are done during the summer. So we typically tend to see higher increases at the beginning, higher expenses at the beginning of the year that level off as we go through the year. So, July and August, when the schools are not occupied, we tend to spend more on property services as we go through the year. Those tend to level out. Again, we're at 57%. Supplies and materials, we are at 3.1 million, about 30%, 35% of the budget. That is slightly under. Some of these are seasonal. With supply chain issues, we order stuff. We are still seeing some delays in when these materials get to us. We pay after delivery. And therefore, although we've encumbered and ordered a good chunk of those supplies and materials, they haven't yet been received. And therefore, you're seeing that lower year-to-date spend compared to prior years. Equipment is primarily technology equipment that we purchase for students. That is at about 41% of the budget at 1.1 million. Again, that's consistent with where we would be this time of year. And then the other smaller item is other object, which is basically miscellaneous other items that don't fit into any of those buckets I just described. It is a small dollar amount, it's about 1% of the overall budget. But again, even that, it's at 43% of the budget and consistent with where we would be this time of year. So all in all, we are where we would anticipate to be. There aren't any issues of concern. The things that we are monitoring, as I mentioned, is the health insurance. And if we start seeing any changes in that, we will come to you. We have had conversations about specialized learning and the drivers of those costs. We are monitoring those, and I think Rob Pennington has been doing a good job of kind of informing us what the drivers are. We are monitoring that. We are anticipating those expenses to be higher than what we budgeted for them. But based on some of these savings throughout the other line items, we anticipate that we should be able to absorb those within the existing budget. But if we don't, it's one of those items that I think in years past, we've gone to the city for a special appropriation if we get to that point. I don't anticipate that happening this year, knock on wood, but we will definitely keep you informed if we do. That's really all I have in terms of the monthly financials. I'd be happy to answer questions. And again, you do have the specific line items in your packets.
Linda, do you have increases on all services, on all these line items? I know we keep talking about increases.
Year over year, let me see.
Yes.
1.5, 19. Year to date, supplies is about 23% less, and equipment is about 20% less year over year compared to where we would be. But the budget to budget, we did anticipate increase because we budgeted an increase. So we would anticipate seeing a little bit higher spend this year compared to last year because we did budget for, inflation and additional expenses this year.
Okay, thank you.
Linda, what about, for instance, and maybe you spoke to this earlier, so on the backup for long-term substitutes, it's like a 70.21% year over growth increase. Speak to that. Is that?
Sure. So I've scrolled to that page now. It should be on your screen, line 101.
Mm-hmm.
And so last year, we started the budget at 350. We adjusted it to 296.
Right.
What we're still seeing here is the use of substitutes year over year is higher, partly because of the vacancy and the turnover and the prevalence of the use of substitutes. However, this is still consistent with where we would be with the budget, because if you look at the percent of the budget spent in the year,
Right.
we're currently at 20.9% of the year compared to where we would be halfway through the year. So although the year over year is higher compared to last year, but for what we had budgeted, we've only spent
20%
of the budget this year compared to what we would have spent last year.
So that's pretty consistent because there were just some big percentages that jumped out at me, like salaries in workshops. I mean, I guess that's because some of those things didn't happen
Correct.
during COVID, and so now those things have happened, and so it looks like it's a big number.
Right. So I think you need to look at those numbers together, the year over year growth, and then the percent of the budget, what we had anticipated it would be.
Okay.
Kristen, did you have anything to add to this?
I was just going to make a comment about substitutes. I believe for this year's financials, like you said, it's running in line with where we are in the year. It looks like we're higher than last year because of the accounting last year. Some of these substitute expenses last year were hitting a baseline item at the schools where they had to hit this subline. So there was some accounting adjustments as well. So that may be skewing the numbers a little bit.
Okay.
Percentage basis.
And then in property and services, there's a year over year growth for boiler repairs. So does that mean that we had some extensive work in those areas, right? I mean, I know that we did do some work with the oil tank replacements and things like that, but this is different, right?
This is different. So the big boiler item that we had this year, I believe was at Brian McMahon.
Right.
We had a combination boiler heating system that went out just before summer school. A majority of that is reimbursed by our insurance carrier, but we do carry $1 million deductible. So we're responsible for the first.
So you've got to pay some. Okay.
Of that. So that's what that is. Mostly related to equipment that is insured, but we still pay the deductible.
And then what about security services? There was a year over year growth there too. Was that based on what?
So, and Kristen can add to this. What we have been doing from a security services standpoint, we've We've been outsourcing
Right.
security, as I believe the agreement was as current employees retire, we replace them with outsourced securities. We're seeing an increase in security services contractuals, but the
Mhm.
offset is in the salaries because we're hiring contracted security. This year, you also recall that we did increase security presence at the schools.
Right. I
At the
figured it was in.
elementary schools, we added, I believe we added a security guard at each school,
Mhm.
I believe. And therefore, and that was also budgeted for, but we do
Right.
anticipate seeing that increase largely driven by those two, combination of those two factors, the outsourcing and the enhanced security at the schools.
Thank you. Does anybody have any other questions? Are we ready to go on to the next item?
I think, actually, sorry, can
Yeah.
you scroll up just a little bit? I just want to make sure that I understand with the staffing side of things.
So, right here?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the percentage of budget spent, that column that you're in,
Yes,
so we really should be, if we're gonna be within budget, if 50% for all of these or thereabouts.
for the most part, yes.
For the
If we-
most part.
Yes,
So we talked about the long-term substitutes. So then if we look at some of the numbers that are a little bit lower, so like teachers at 38%, others certified, aides, those three kind of stand out. And that is a direct correlation to our staffing shortages, correct?
yes.
And
And then as I
ability to
mentioned
hire.
earlier, with teachers, many teachers spread their checks through the 12 months period. So we have that 3-month balloon payment that we pay at the end of the year for the summer pay, and therefore that typically hits the accounts in July. So what you're seeing here is the teacher salary, 9 months teacher salary spread over 12. And so we're only seeing the 9 months
I
split.
see.
And then in June, there's typically a big hit in the teacher salary line that brings it in line with the
Okay.
year because of that balloon payment we make in the summer.
So then for teachers, the adjusted budget number is accurate to what we think it will be once the balloon payments are paid out at the end of the fiscal year. There is no, contingency on being able to hire there.
Right. So the way that we budget, we budget for a full complement of staff, right? So the 84.18 million is the adjustment we make that if we're fully staffed and if every position is filled, that's what we will spend at the end, by the end of the year.
Okay, and that's the current expectation then, adjusted budget.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anybody ready to move on? So we will move on to approval of budget transfers, which really is that's obviously related to what we just discussed.
So I'm on the transfer slide. We have 2 slides of transfers, and I'm gonna toss it to Kristen to kind of go over these, and then these do require your approval, and then we take them to the full.
Hi, everyone. There's a little less than we usually have for the transfers. We did a lot up front, which was our goal, so we can, get it, move all the money to the right buckets of things we knew of right away. We only have 6 transfers this month. The first one, as you can see, has to do with facilities, general supplies. We were short in that account, mostly due to pricing and using a little bit more supplies, but inflation really is affecting that. So we scraped all the facilities accounts, little pieces here and there, 2,000 here and there to get us the 86,000 we anticipate we'll need extra on this account. The second line you can see here is we have a reserve teacher line in the budget every year. We reserve 3 teachers worth of funding in case there's an enrollment issue or a class size overage. In this case, Wolf Pit had an enrollment overage or class size overage in kindergarten. They don't have any additional rooms to move into, so the district by policy provides them with a para funded by the district, which comes out of the reserve teacher account or para account. The third transfer here. This is just an accounting of a teacher who was originally set up at Nathan Hale under the library account. But just for accounting purposes, it should be 50% library, 50% unified arts. Oh, sorry, you're on the next slide.
I did move on. You were done with the previous, right?
So these next two, or actually, yeah, the next two budget transfers here relate to what we're all aware of, the out-of-district costs that are rising this year and anticipated to rise next year. So we're trying to chip away at the problem every month and transfer any funding we see that is available, even though we like to keep certain things in contingency. As you can see for these two budget transfers, we're taking money from the MLL holding account, one of an assistant MLL supervisor, and then MLL teachers. What we usually keep these for is if we get an influx with MLL students, we can pull from this account. It was 3 teachers and 1 supervisor, but we decided that since we have the out-of-district costs, tuition costs rising, we want to take all that extra funding there and put it towards those accounts. The first one's 178,000 and the second one's 230, but that leaves us with no contingency with MLL if we do get an influx. And then finally, the last one is just to shift funding from a 119 salary account to a 330 account, since that speech therapist role is open and split between Project Search and Next Steps. So we're gonna try to get some outsource staffing there. Anyone have any questions or comments?
What happens if we get an influx of MLLs and we've just drained that account?
Then we'll have to go back to the well and start scraping other accounts. We usually
wow.
don't like to do that, but since
Right.
we have the out-of-district tuition increase significantly, we wanted to
Right.
start chipping away at that financial
Right.
issue sooner than
Right.
later.
Well, this just really demonstrates more of what we've been discussing with the budget.
Exactly.
So just in terms of being able to have a contingency, because things are so fluid, particularly with
Mhm.
students moving into the district. And so this really illuminates all of that. So
Mhm. It also answers the question that people always are asking, how come we have excess? Because it's always constantly moving. It's a fluid budget. It's not something that it's very stable. Anything can change at any point in time, and it can be from staff to students to programs. So
Linda, could you go back to the first slide just for a second?
Yes. This one here?
Yes, please. So down at the bottom there, that last transfer.
Yep.
I don't understand it's from to, but they look identical.
It's just an account. So if you
Oh, I see, library versus
Yep,
arts.
so it's
That's the only change.
2220 versus 11210. So it's just an accounting to
Ever so
differentiate
slight.
unified
Yeah, I
arts.
see it now. Okay.
We tried to get the expenses in the right buckets because when we look at the year over year, we
right.
do a true apples to apples. So it's cumbersome to move the money, but it does provide for a more accurate accounting and history of where the expenses actually hit. It would be easy to just hit the account that has the money, but it does mess up the reporting when you do that. So we go
Right.
through the same process of moving the money so that we hit the right buckets.
That makes sense.
EFS state reporting, we try to be as accurate as possible for that.
And that's why you keep getting awards.
So Kristen, can you go over the aid part again, that line item?
For the,
For the,
for
yes,
Wolf Pit.
Oh,
uh,
back here?
yes, for Wolf
Okay.
Pit. And that's, another explanation as to why our budget is so fluid. And you said something about not having enough space and that we needed an aid.
Right, so what we usually go by the class size guidelines. For example, 22 students per classroom in elementary in grades K through 2. So if the district will fund a paraeducator up to 6 students over within that grade level of classrooms by school. In this particular case, sometimes they open up a new classroom if it's even more over than that, over 6 per grade. But Wolf Pit, the way it's structured now in the special programs and the way their class sizes are, they don't have any additional room. So
Mhm.
the district funded a para out of the reserve teacher account, because we do put 3 teachers worth of funding in our budget contingency. And typically we do use them every year, whether it's 3 teachers or 2 teachers and 2 paras.
Okay, thank you.
This is good information to know too, as we go
Mhm.
through the budget, when it comes to how you have to deploy resources when you have an overage in a classroom and what that would look like if you didn't have those folks there to do that. So let's see, next on the agenda is a budget development update by Mr. Raslani.
Yes, I think I'll tag team this with Diana. I believe the transfers do require a motion and a vote
Oh, I'm sorry.
so that
Yes.
it can go to the full
Yes.
board.
Thank you. So can I get a motion to approve probably we need to get a motion for both, right? The financial report and the budget transfers, or is it just
Just the
budget?
transfers.
Just the transfers? All right,
Mhm.
so can I get a motion to approve the budget transfers, please?
Hi,
Kara, second by Ms. Carpio.
yes.
Motion to accept the budget transfers? Everybody? Okay.
Motion
let's
to
see.
accept the budget transfers and move them to the full board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on to the next. We ready?
Yes, so I wanted to just spend some time just to give you an update on where we are with the budget development. And maybe Diana, you may want to share about the joint meeting that's tomorrow of this committee and the counterpart committee on the council. So we're at the process where we, after the Board of Ed approved the FY24 budget, we submitted it to the city for their review. In the process, this morning, the finance team, together with the superintendent and deputy superintendent, went over the budget, the request with the city CFO. The next step in the budget development process is that the city CFO makes a recommendation. It's actually the joint recommendation of the city CFO and the mayor. They will make a recommendation of what our budget will be. I believe either February 4th or February 5th. So at the next meeting, we will have further conversations at this committee, what that recommendation looks like and kind of where do we go from here. So that's kind of the next series of steps. The capital budget and the operating budget they kind of take divergent paths. And so the capital budget will go through the planning and zoning committees. So they will have hearings on the budget where we will present on the capital budget. They also have a public hearing date that we will share with you on the capital budget, and therefore we would invite people that have interest in these projects to come to that public hearing and kind of share their comments. On the operating budget side, once the mayor issues and the CFO their recommendation, the BET, the Finance and Claims Committee of the Common Council, they will have a public hearing on the budget as well. And then the BET will also have a public hearing on the budget. And then the Common Council will set a cap that will give some guidance to the BET. So that's just an update of where we are. And maybe I'll toss it to Diana to talk about the meeting tomorrow evening as part of that process.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Sorry, Dana.
No, it's okay.
Did you say that the capital budget request, what the city passed it over to the BET or to who? Like, is that what you said? They
Yeah,
did
so
not vote on it?
what happens is we submit the capital budget request to the city, both the capital and the operating. From there, the city CFO will make a recommendation on the operating budget that they pass on to the BET and Common Council. He will also make a recommendation on the capital budget. He hasn't done that.
And do we, is that, sorry to interrupt you, but I don't remember that happening last year, that was passed over without the city weighing in on it. Is that standard, or is there any reason?
No,
to-
that is the process. So the committee
Okay.
so the city CFO will make a recommendation
Only on
goes to the-
operating?
on operating and capital. So
Okay,
the operating budget goes to the Common Council and the Board of Estimates first. The capital budget goes to the, I believe it's the Planning and Zoning Committee. They take a look at it, and then from there, it goes back to the Common Council, and then the mayor makes a final recommendation. So that's kind of how those two.
okay, thank you.
Right, and
Yeah.
then tomorrow is a joint meeting between the Common Council and the Board of Education, specifically to be able to ask each other questions regarding the budget, regarding their budget, expenditures, percentages, where we open up the dialogue, because there's a lot of times there's either miscommunication or misunderstandings on both sides. And tomorrow we just come to the table together to be able to have those clarifying questions answered. And also, to explain to them what our needs are and why, because there's so much going on. And this won't be the first and only meeting. There'll be multiple meetings. And like Lunda said, they'll either come in with a number tomorrow, and if not, it will be in February. But we can start our conversations now, just, to feel the waters and see where everybody is at and the importance of different things. Every Common Council member tomorrow will have questions for us, and we in turn will individually have time to have that conversation too. So it's just clarifying, putting everything on the table, and being able to start conversations.
Dan, I have a question for you.
Mhm.
I noticed on the agenda for tomorrow, there's an opportunity for public comments at the beginning of the
Mhm.
meeting. If those comments, become excessive in terms of timing, the meeting will go past 7 PM, because I think there's another.
It will be a hard stop at 7 because there's multiple meetings, and I believe the city has their own finance meeting at 7 o'clock.
Right.
So we would have to probably either do a special meeting or at our next meeting have those conversations. But hopefully, public comments won't go too long. Not because they're not wanted, but only because the public can hear what we have to say and what the city has to say, and then at the following meeting, be able to speak their mind at either Common Council meeting or the Board of Ed meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Mm.
So I'd like to get a motion to adjourn from someone. Thank you, staff and everyone, for attending the meeting and for having patience with me during my first meeting. So
You did great.
would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
meeting is adjourned at 6:35.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
I know
everyone.
Sherry